welcome everyone in the United States, Canada, and around the world to another inspiring episode of It's a Wrap with Rap, the podcast that shares real stories of hope, resilience, and purpose. I am your host, Ron Rapaport. Today we have an extraordinary guest joining us, Judy Kim Cage, author of her new powerful book, Super Survivor: How Denial, Resistance, and Persistence Can Lead to Success and a Better Life After Stroke. Judy's story is one of courage, faith, and transformation after surviving a life-changing stroke. Judy doesn't just chronicle her recovery, she shows us how the human spirit can rise even stronger after adversity. Judy, welcome to the podcast. It's such an honor to have you with us today.
Thank you, Sharon, for having me.
Well, you're more than welcome, and we're so honored to have you. Now, Judy, let's start at the beginning. Can you take us back to the day of your stroke? What do you remember most about that experience and how it changed your life in an instant?
Ooh. Well, now it was back on January 20th, 2019.
Okay.
My husband and I had just come to visit Atlanta, Georgia to see his oldest daughter and her now husband. We, had dinner by the stadium, and then we said, let's have lunch tomorrow. Went back to the hotel, and at about 4 in the morning, I was told, I woke up screaming
Wow.
very, very, very loudly in pain. I just remember basically a lot of darkness and feeling as though it was constantly nighttime, whereas I was told it was not. It was during the day. I had numbness and tingling, and this really, really, really bad headache, like the worst headache you've ever had, just on my right side. And I just remember thinking, this can't possibly be anything else other than a TIA,
Yeah.
mini stroke, which I'd had many, many times since the age of 4. And the pain continued. My body became paralyzed. My husband had to take me to the bathroom by rigging a set of bed sheets and transporting me over because I couldn't walk. I didn't
So
realize I
sort of like a
couldn't move.
gurney, in other words.
Yeah,
Yeah.
essentially. And I refused to call 911 or let him call 911. I said it couldn't possibly be anything else. I'm already cured of all my diseases. I had my surgery. I'm good to go.
Yeah.
And it turns out I was very wrong. But I, said I would absolutely divorce him if he called 911. It's such an ominous threat, of course. And I eventually had thrown up so many times, and my headache didn't go away like it normally would. I called my vascular neurologist. Then 911. He said to call 911. We called them. Ambulance and a mobile stroke unit came by. They did a number of scans. They had me talk with a neurologist over telecall. And this was before the age of, the Zoom calls.
Yeah.
And they said that I had a stroke, that I had massive, pressure accumulating inside my skull, that, I would have to, of course, go to the hospital. But they gave rigid choice to either scan me every few hours or to put a drain in my skull and to have me on a ventilator, essentially. So he chose rather, to have me scanned every few hours.
Yeah.
And essentially, the next 3 weeks were kind of a blur for me. I remember a few scans, but I just remember the pain. It was this horrible pain of the blood soaking back into my brain.
Yeah. Now,
Um,
I don't mean to make this about me in any sense, but I had the same thing happen to me because I fell down last year, like in January or February, and in June, I was acting strange and not remembering where things were and blah, blah, blah. And winds up, I saw my doctor who wasn't in, a PA was there, but she had neurology background, told me to go in and get an immediate MRI. And when I got the MRI, I had a subdural hematoma. And the next morning, same thing with the pressure, same thing you had. And I didn't have a choice. You know, they had to do the drain. They had to drill into the head and all that. So I know what that's like, and it's pure hell, to put it
How
bluntly.
long were you on, or I guess under?
Well, they put me under the next morning, and they did the emergency surgery,
Mhm.
and I was in the hospital for, like, I think 3 days, something like
Oh,
that. Yeah. Probably didn't have the same amount of pain you did, but they said, had they not done the surgery, all that pressure against the brain would have just been
mhm.
the end, so, yeah. But anyway, before your stroke,
Yeah.
what kind of life and career were you leading, and how was your health, and how did your identity or sense of self change afterward?
I was a corporate nerd. I I was and still am a compliance director at
Okay.
excuse me, at Lumens. Of course, the mortgage industry has gone through a number of changes
Yeah.
commercially. We absolutely don't have to go into that at all.
No.
It is just that I had, finally gotten the job of my dreams. I had, cultivated everything into this position after, beginning to work in 2001 after graduating from undergrad. And I had this position where I was flying back to Columbus, Ohio every other week. So I'd spend the week there, fly home for the weekend, and the next week working out of an office, and that was rented for me, and then come back. And I did that for the entirety of 2018. And
Wow.
then it was in January of 2019 that my body must have said, okay, Judy, enough.
Yeah.
It's time for a break now. And that is when the stroke happened. So I was, as my friend Kathleen says, moving and grooving. I was, just so pleased with where I was in my career. And I had had these brain surgeries back in 2008.
Okay.
So I thought, I had been diagnosed with what's known as moya moya. It's a rare cerebrovascular disorder. And so to mitigate the blood flow not going to the brain, your brain forms these collateral vessels, which then have very thin walls. And because I had these very thin walls and a combination of that and high blood pressure,
Yeah.
that's what causes the hemorrhagic stroke. It's usually found in children. I had my surgeries performed at Children's Hospital in Boston. And of course, I thought, that was the only thing that they could do. I basically had the cure for the disorder by having the surgery. And I had survived for 10 years without major incident, you
Yeah.
know, with barely a headache, barely any pins and needles. Occasionally I would have high blood pressure when I had stress, but I really hadn't thought too much about it. The only thing, if I ever had a headache, I'd be going into the ER. They'd say, well, there's really nothing we can do. I mean, the next thing to do would be to have another surgery, and they would put those burr holes in my skull, ironically,
Yeah.
uh, to,
Which I had.
to
Yeah.
let the pressure come out.
Yeah.
Uh, so I just figured everything was fine. I was going to keep pushing along, keep being ambitious and stubborn, and then I had my body taken away from me. Everything that I knew in the sense of reality, in the sense of function and what what we've gotten accustomed to, walking, speaking, clearly with speed, being able to button your shirt, so tie your shoes, being able to eat with both hands or even just to use the left hand. And for me, I also I had left side neglect, which meant that I did not recognize things on the left side of my body or out in the universe.
Wow.
So I would run into door jams. Once I was
Oh,
in
I bet. Yeah.
there, I would bump into the door jam. I was sitting in a wheelchair and my arm, because it had subluxed, it had fallen out of the shoulder socket. It was hanging down very low. They had an armrest put onto the wheelchair so that I could rest my arm on top of it.
Because you couldn't
And
feel anything, right?
I couldn't. I couldn't.
Wow.
I one day was sitting in my wheelchair and I saw somebody out of the corner of my eye, so sitting so close to me, right in my personal space. And I thought, who the heck is doing this? This is so rude. Like, come on, move away, get away.
Yeah.
And then I realized that nobody was there. It was me.
Yeah.
This was my arm that I thought belonged to a complete stranger that was
Wow.
not attached to my body. And I think those sorts of things make you question reality.
Yeah.
The brain signals were not going quickly enough from my brain to my bladder. So I was wetting the bed. That was heartbreaking. Of course, I'm back to normal. I just want to
Oh,
assure.
yeah. No
Oh, of
problem there.
course. So I basically had to make a full stop. It was a question of, you know, am I going to be able to walk again? Am I going to be able to get out of bed again? Will I be able to go home, see my dog again? Would I ever go back to work? Of course, I insisted I absolutely was going to go back to work. In my mind, there was no question. That was all I wanted to do.
So you had a positive mindset right from the beginning.
Or a stubborn one. Yeah,
Yeah.
most
Yeah.
definitely. If you were to ask my boss today, he laughs when I say, I know I insisted on going, that, not many people get to go back to work.
Yeah.
Definitely not full time, and then definitely not get a promotion. And after that 5 years, and I was able to do that probably, and I call it because of my denial and resistance to
Yeah.
it.
And
And
we're gonna talk about that
absolutely,
in a
yeah,
second.
yeah.
What was the most difficult part of your recovery? Was it physical, mental, or emotional?
I think it was mental and emotional. And I only say that because the physical part of it was definitely challenging,
Yeah.
but I can say it now because I'm on the other side of it.
Yeah.
To have to learn to walk again, just not being able to, and realizing that, and just realizing that I couldn't get up and do whatever it was that I wanted to do or was able to do before, that was just so disheartening.
Yeah.
Or again, the reality of, you know, existence was not there anymore. Everything that I had trusted wasn't there. And so and my physicality came back pretty quickly. I was walking by the time I left McGee inpatient, and then I eventually did 2 rounds of outpatient, but after 1 round, I said, "Okay, I'm gonna go back to Columbus. We're going to see, let's test this out." And I think so then the mental part of it was absolutely the most challenging because you question, why did this happen? What's going on? What do I do now? I survived. Wait, what am I supposed to do now? If I can't go to work, then who am I? And also, letting seeing my family and friends without them giving me the saddest, most pitiful eyes you've ever seen.
Yeah.
um, sitting in the hospital or laying in the hospital, that was tough. And then the odd part about that is on the flip side, I'm so well recovered that I'll be going out to dinner or going shopping with my girlfriends, and they just assume everything's fine because I look absolutely fine.
Yeah.
But there's isolation, there's loneliness, there is this feeling of, oh my gosh, nobody else could possibly understand unless they went through the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it is basically like I was picked up and I was moved way over here. And it was just, you had zero control. You had basically zero pride anymore.
Well, you had to rely on everybody to do everything, to help you.
I again was stubborn, but absolutely. I didn't, I had CNAs washing my hair. I was, naked in a wheelchair in
Yeah.
basically what seemed like a gym locker room shower.
Yeah.
you
I mean,
know,
that's
and
tough. That it's got to wear on you mentally. No,
absolutely. Yeah.
absolutely. Now, your book, Super
Mhm.
Survivor, which I read, it's a great book, great read, and we're featuring it on the podcast, and we're doing advertising for it. It's a great book, and people need to read it. But your book focuses on denial, resistance, and persistence as
Mhm.
keys to recovery. So, can you explain to us how each of those help shape your journey toward healing?
I think it is, and I don't necessarily lay it as clearly out within the text of the book, but when they talk about a stroke super survivor, they talk about someone who refuses to accept that their life won't be the same as it was before.
Have you ever been pushed to the point where quitting felt like the only option, where pain, setbacks, or life altering challenges made you wonder if you had anything left inside? If so, this message is for you. The Strength Within You, It's Always Too Early to Quit by Jay Setchell is more than just a book. It's a powerful reminder of the resilience that lives inside every one of us. Jay Setchell doesn't speak from theory, he speaks from experience. After surviving devastating accidents and enduring multiple surgeries, Jay found himself facing physical pain, emotional exhaustion, and moments when giving up seemed easier than pushing forward. But instead of quitting, he discovered something life changing, an inner strength that carried him through recovery, adversity, and uncertainty. In The Strength Within You, Jay shares his journey with honesty, grit, and heart. This book isn't about pretending life is easy. It's about facing reality head on and learning how to rise anyway. You'll discover how to keep moving forward when life knocks you down, why quitting is often a reaction, not a solution, how resilience is built through struggle, not comfort, practical encouragement for anyone facing physical, emotional, or mental challenges. Whether you're battling illness, recovering from injury, dealing with loss, or simply feeling stuck in life, this book meets you where you are and reminds you that it's always too early to quit. Jay's story will inspire you to rethink your limits, redefine your strength, and reclaim hope even when the road ahead feels impossible. This book is for anyone struggling to keep going, anyone who needs a reminder that their story isn't over yet. If you or someone you love needs motivation, encouragement, and a powerful real life testimony of perseverance, The Strength Within You, It's Always Too Early to Quit is a must read. Don't let a tough chapter convince you the story is finished. Pick up your copy of The Strength Within You, It's Always Too Early to Quit by Jay Setchell today and rediscover the strength that's been inside you all along. Because no matter how hard things get, it's always too early to quit. Available from Amazon.
Or whether it was because their family relied on them, because their career meant so much to them. They just absolutely would not accept it, completely refused it, completely denied, and then worked towards, getting it all back.
Yeah.
I I was constantly in denial. I said, "No, no, no, I am getting my life back." I talked to a number of volunteers and classes and students saying, I felt like I was at the top of my game and all of a sudden it was taken away. And, I honestly don't know what to do or who I would be without who I was. So it was, taking on, having a pretty serious stroke, spending 10 days in the ICU and almost dying, and then, losing all your facilities. But then it's basically being able to come back from a significant setback and to say, yes, I still succeeded. I still made it past. And yeah, it's maintaining the positive attitude. It is, I make I make jokes regularly about different things. I say, "Oh, I'm potty trained now. It's so great." Or,
Yeah. We're
you
going back
know,
to the basics. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And or I would say, my left hand wasn't working, and I would say, once it would get some skills back, I would actually like give it a high five. It's,
Yeah.
yeah, evil twin, nice job, good work. And my therapists would, crack up alongside me. They'd call me a rock star. They'd say, "Judy, usually we get screamed at because people are frustrated that they can't think straight or talk normally or, get dressed." And so really when I say it's denial and resistance, in my mind, it absolutely was. It was accepting way more or I guess making happen what nobody else would expect would happen.
So it was a survival mechanism.
Yes, yes. Absolutely, that's a great way to put it.
And that was mostly in the early days.
It is still now. There are still times when now, I mean, after the 5-year mark passed, I said, "I life is absolutely too short. I'm going to go ride the rides or like take the trips and, go have the fun."
Yeah.
Um, because I realized that I had the second chance now.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
and,
Absolutely.
I was given this opportunity to live a happy life, whereas the the past, the old Judy wouldn't have necessarily known that, She was stuck in her funk. She was stuck in, like, probably needing a few more years of therapy. Whereas, now it totally gives you a completely different perspective. And then you value time for what it is. You value your energy. And that has opened up so many doors and, so much joy.
Yeah. There's a saying here on this podcast. I'm a two-time male breast cancer survivor as well. And so my my mantra was, instead of why is this happening to me, I
Mm,
said, why is this happening for me? I changed it. And it did happen for a reason. And
mm,
it did open up, like you said, a perspective. Traveling,
mm,
seeing other things, you get a perspective of, hey, this isn't guaranteed. Every day isn't guaranteed. And you and me survived, and we have to, find our purpose. You know,
mhm.
there's more to life than just going to the office. You know, you have to,
Mm.
there's much more. And you realize that once you've been through that. Now, resistance can sound like a struggle, yet in your story, it seems to have been a source of strength. How did resisting your limitations help you move forward?
Oh my goodness. Well, I would define it as So we have I guess, well, everyone has a limitation of energy, like
Yeah.
only a capacity to go so far.
Yeah.
And along with my long-term disability function, the fact that I could only work so many hours in a week, I was limited to, I think, 80% of my full-time hours before I would be, basically kicked off the support. I I have a very task and deadline oriented job, so of course I wanted to get as many of those done and done well as possible. So I would overwork. I would work, 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 work. And then during these deadline periods, I would be working a full time or more. My capacity, of course, was limited though. So I would work incredibly hard, get it done, and then I would be out, just shattered for, like the next, I was basically working half time for the next 2 weeks after that
Yeah.
because I had overdone it. There are times when I lost the ability to speak for 3 days. My speed was way low. I, could barely get up off the sofa. My mindset in terms of bringing inputs in, like watching TV, listening to music, forget that. I mean, if, a car goes by and the noise is too loud or a motorbike goes by, and, I mean, that can be torturous and draining. And I would constantly test that boundary. I would do it over and over and over and over again. Deadline passes, I make it, fall down, do it again and do it again and do it again. And I would recover. But, your body and your mind tells you that it recovers on its own time once you pushed it too far.
Yeah.
But again, that's where I resisted that limitation. I said, no, no, no. And I do that to this day.
You
I
fall off the horse, but you get back up.
absolutely. And I am so stubborn and I say, let me do it again. Let me test it again. Let me do more this time and let me do more this time. And there are times, actually, probably, yeah, there was a time last month where I had to do a full stop for 3 days.
Yeah.
And I still, after the 3 days, I thought I'd be better, but I kept working. And then I would find out that I had little mistakes pretty much sprinkled out throughout, my projects.
Oh, sure.
And, but I think that without pushing those limits, without constantly trying, without just seeing what was possible, I don't think I would have expanded or utilized my neuroplasticity as much as I did. So I was able to, I mean, I'm taking baby steps in a way, but then I'm building upon that foundation.
Yeah.
So that's what kept propelling me forward.
And persistence. What does persistence look like on the hardest days when progress feels painfully slow?
Uh, these are amazing, man. I It is me telling my brain to shut up. It is saying, "You can keep going, Judy. You're gonna be fine. You're just keep going, keep doing
Yeah.
it, and then you can relax later." When people say they can sleep when they're dead, I mean, this is really, testing that limit.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's me saying, "All right, no, 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 I'm gonna keep trying." And it's usually to a detriment. I usually find out that I've had more errors afterwards. And then, either my boss is telling me, he sees me or he hears me, and he just hears it in my voice or he sees it in my eyes and he's like, "Judy, shut down." And I'm like, okay. And sometimes I'm thinking to myself, I could still keep going. I'm
He's
like,
probably got to be very proud to have you. I mean, you're like the ideal worker bee.
The corporate soldier.
Yeah, you're soldiering on. Who in your support system, such as doctors, therapists, family, or friends, made a major difference in your recovery?
Rich was my absolute largest supporter.
Rich, your husband,
Rich, my husband,
right?
yes. My acute therapists were absolutely, and still to this day, are my biggest supporters. My very first physical therapist, Maria, she basically was teaching me how to sit up and to stay up for a while. Alex, her student, had basically taught me that I was not able to walk, and I had kept insisting that I could. And then my speech therapist, Maddie, my physical therapist, Heather, and my occupational therapist, Charlotte, they have all, I mean, I've told them about this project and they've been like, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing. How do you go back to work full time, get promoted, and then decide to write a book about the whole thing?"
Which
And
you did,
so
by the way.
just, to make them, I mean, making them proud is icing on the cake. Absolutely. But they have been so supportive and, they just give, just like the praise and enough of the feedback that, "Well, Judy, you were funny and you could laugh through this. And, that made you one of the great patients, and that was just so uplifting."
I interviewed a fellow on a podcast who tried to take his life, and he lost 70% of his blood, and he was in the ICU for a long time, and he had no support, Judy. When I say he had no support, he had no family support or anything like that. He had therapists, of course, and that kind of thing. But
Mhm.
I said, "How'd you get through it?" You know what he said? Humor, humor. If it hadn't been for humor, he never would have made it. And you just said humor.
Yes.
So yeah, so that's a good lesson for everybody out there listening.
If you
Uh,
can't laugh at it, I mean, then what are you gonna laugh at, right?
yeah, right. What advice would you give others who are in the early stages of recovery and feeling hopeless or defeated? What would you tell them?
Um, I, through my peer mentoring, have encountered a number of patients that have still been in the hospital and they are in those early stages, and I get emotional thinking about them. I It is a tough thing because every stroke is different. You want to tell people that, "Hey, I mean, I was able to get there. That's
Yeah,
great." But that situation is not, as a constant. Um,
right, right.
and but I would say your body will recover, your mind will recover in a way that it chooses. You
Okay,
can test it. You can, like maybe brush your teeth with your opposite hand, your non-dominant hand, and
right.
try to do things that.
A warm cup in your hands, a quiet pause in a busy day, a conversation that lingers long after it ends. That's exactly where the book High on Life by Lorie Kleiner Eckert invites you to begin. In High on Life, Lorie Kleiner Eckert blends heartfelt storytelling, thoughtful reflections, and everyday wisdom into a beautifully grounded reading experience. Just like sharing a cup of chai, this book encourages you to slow down, breathe, and truly savor life, one moment at a time. This isn't a book about having all the answers, it's a book about asking the right questions. Through relatable stories and gentle insights, Laurie explores themes of connection, resilience, gratitude, and self discovery. Each chapter feels like a quiet conversation with a trusted friend, honest, comforting, and deeply human. Whether you're navigating change, seeking balance, or simply craving a moment of calm in a noisy world, High on Life meets you right where you are. It reminds us that life doesn't have to be rushed to be meaningful, and that reflection can be a powerful act of self care. This book is perfect for readers who enjoy personal essays and reflective storytelling, anyone looking to reconnect with themselves in the present moment, fans of mindful living, personal growth, and soulful conversations. So the next time you pour yourself a cup of tea, coffee, or chai, consider pairing it with a book that nourishes more than just the mind. High on Life by Lorie Kleiner Eckert is more than a book. It's an invitation to pause, reflect, and rediscover the beauty in everyday life. Pick up your copy today and start your own conversation with life, one sip, one page, and one moment at a time. Available from Amazon.
Keep connecting your neurons. And, once you get through your, doctor and therapist prescribed therapy, you can start experimenting and doing things on your own, which you will know, gives you feedback. But your body, if you, but the positive self-talk, it's coming out more and more. If you're negative about something, if you say you can't do it, then chances are you're more likely that you can't do it.
Yeah.
Or if I say, "Judy, your brain is a piece of crap." Like, or, um, sorry,
It's
getting
going to be a piece of crap, right?
well, yeah.
But what you're saying, I guess, in a roundabout way, is
Hmm.
for the people out there who are feeling, hopeless or whatever, you're giving them hope.
And please be kind to yourself when you're recovering,
Right.
because the kinder you are to yourself, the more likely it is that you will, when the environment is friendly, that's when your body will respond.
Right. So what inspired you to write Super Survivor? Was there a specific moment when you knew you needed to share your story?
There were a couple of things. One was the whole survival rate of a hemorrhagic stroke being so low, basically being 26.7% after 5 years. So I said, wait, I basically only have a third of a chance of making it to 5 years, which is, how I would interpret it. But, learning that wasn't the case. But making it to the 5 year mark, and all of the people that I did meet, all the people that have come up to me, have asked me about, you know, any issues, whether they're having neurological deficits because of age or, because of, chronic illnesses that they just were undiagnosed with. I've learned a lot from going through my own difficult diagnoses.
Mhm.
And I think seeing everyone seeing me being so physically able, like there's nothing wrong with me, and just continuing to treat things that way. It kind of amazes me. They say you can never judge a book by its cover. You absolutely cannot. But, how do we shake people out of that? How do we create additional awareness? Or, how can we improve the lives of people who don't know that they can ask or are afraid to ask for accommodations, or even to say, "Hey, I'm having a tough day. Can you help me?"
Yeah,
And hopefully there's going to be a little more understanding out in the world.
absolutely. Did the writing process, help you emotionally or mentally? How
Oh
did
my
putting your
gosh.
journey into words affect your perspective?
Yes, yes. Well, a few months after the stroke, I had started a blog, and doing that and actually documenting these, moments in time was absolutely helpful. It definitely helps me work through emotions that I couldn't share with anybody else. If my boss or if other coworkers said, "How are you doing?" And I'm like, "What, what do you wanna know?
Yeah,
Do you want honesty? Are you sure?" And so those sorts of feelings I was able to process through writing. And then the entire process of putting it into book form,
yeah,
and then even dealing with the people in the publishing industry or, are the
I heard that's pretty
industry.
tough.
It is, yeah.
Yeah,
It's so different because now I'm encountering more and more people with chronic illnesses or with, medical difficulties. And so, you're I'm feeling more and more supported and understood by, an environment of my population now. But,
right,
uh, but gosh, I mean, trying to explain, what it's like to have a stroke or to live with these deficits to somebody who's never been sick before, and who
right.
thrives on, business,
Yeah.
essentially. It's hard. So
I mean
that brought a lot of awareness to
I
me.
mean, are you still going through any therapies right now?
I use little gadgets here and there, and then I'll
Okay.
do different physical therapies on my and I'm in talk therapy, which I'd been in, years before the stroke as well. But but essentially, I've kind of, I'll have different tools out there. There's, my stress ball. If I squeeze it a lot using my left hand, I start feeling tingles come back into my left hand.
Yeah.
And, I'll do things like that. I'll put these insoles into my shoe, which have these little, like almost little raised nubs on them, so that I'll constantly be feeling with my foot, reminding my left foot that it's there.
See, the
Um,
the interesting thing
so
that,
yeah.
that you're telling me is when people see you physically or they see me physically,
Mhm.
I mean, I'm still going through some cancer treatments and things, and I still have my issues. But if you looked at me, you'd say there's nothing wrong with you, and nobody really understands that this stuff, it's not just like, oh, I went to the hospital for 6 weeks, they discharged me, boom, it's over. It doesn't work like that.
No,
It's always collateral damage. There's always something going on. So,
always a
yeah.
compensation we're doing.
And
Yeah.
people don't understand it. I mean, maybe they will listening to this. They'll get an idea at least that, you know, even though you got discharged doesn't mean it's over by any means. Yeah. Now looking back, what has your stroke taught you about gratitude, purpose, and what true success means?
These are so heavy.
Well,
No, they're fantastic.
I'm trying my best
This
here.
is one no, no, no. This I love being asked these questions actually, but they definitely bring up the emotion,
Yeah,
Gratitude, gosh. I see it in multiple moments in every day. Things that I never would have necessarily been grateful for. Now walking into the fall air, for instance, and feeling, the air fill my lungs and, just seeing the sun out and seeing the leaves change color. And sorry, I don't know when this is coming out, but
no, no,
it's just I kind of have these glimmers and I'm in awe and I do something as simple as cross a street at a green light, and I make it across the street when it's still green, and I think, "Wow, this is amazing." I wasn't sure if I could ever be out in public, do this, drive again,
right.
eat again, pick up my niece again, and I think there's so much gratitude in that, and in the fact that, yes, I did survive it all. Uh, it and that it just flows so easily now.
Yeah,
It
and
truly
you didn't
does.
have that perspective before all this.
No,
I
no.
mean, you wouldn't have been
Mm.
sitting there watching the sun come up and the leaves falling, you
You're
know?
like, "Oh, can I get back to bed now?"
Just a quick question.
Mhm.
Before all this happened, were you physically active?
Not in the way that people are usually I was not a fan of the gym.
Okay.
Every so often I would, get on a certain kick and do like P90X or, like start
I
doing
mean, so you
something
weren't a
else. But
marathon runner
oh heck no, no, no,
or
no.
lifting
And that's
weights or any of that stuff.
and that's why I wanted to try to run Broad Street in Philly, which was, 10 miles. I said I couldn't walk, so now I'm going to run 10 miles. And that's when my doctor said, yeah, maybe that's not such a great idea.
You might want to start a little, maybe a
And then I
5K
picked
or
different goals, and I knew I would pick a lot of different goals, and
yeah,
and that was also another building point, going to music school and taking piano lessons again, or just picking up a paintbrush,
yeah.
things that I wouldn't have thought, but that now absolutely bring joy.
So, Judy, you do mentoring of stroke patients. Tell us about that a little bit about what you do.
It's funny because not funny, but the majority of patients that I see have all been referred to me through McGee
Now,
uh,
McGee is located where?
in Philadelphia.
Okay, so you live in
Mhm.
Philadelphia?
I do. Mhm.
Okay,
I also attend the stroke support group. So after, peer mentor and stroke group training, they the program pairs you with patients you could have commonalities with.
okay,
For instance, some are interested in going back to work. Some, like one in particular was also a young stroke survivor. I was 39 when I had mine. He was 40 when he had his about a year ago. Or, there was another patient who actually had moya moya. And, but there are plenty of times when I am turned away. They'll say, Judy seems like a great person that will, be a great mentor for this person. But then they say, well, one, this person wants somebody who's had children so they can, relate. And
yeah.
I do not. My dog is my baby, but he doesn't count in this case.
Well, I count them. I love dogs. I had a dog.
And then, but yeah, no, I mean, basically turned away because people say that I'm too healed and they don't want to be discouraged, or I'm not the best example because if they don't see me struggling, then they can't really relate or think that, I'm like too far out of it in a lot of ways. And so I completely understand that. Sometimes I'm like, really? Why is this a double-edged sword?
It doesn't sound all that fair because you can give them a lot of insight even though you're at your stage where you are. But anyway, that's just my thinking.
Not everybody wants it either, though. I mean, I remember being a patient and being asked whether I wanted to have a peer mentor.
Yeah,
And I had one, and she had spasticity in her hand and arm that had formed 3 years after her stroke had happened, and
yeah.
enough so that she couldn't shake my hand.
Uh-huh.
And I had said, I was looking at myself and doing a comparison, which of course, is never what you're, supposed to do, but naturally, I guess is what you do. And I said, well, wait a second. I'm still in the hospital and I'm doing way better than she's doing. I'm like, how is this going to help? And she, broke the news to me that I would lose my driver's license. Yeah, no, but I remember thinking like, "No, no, I'm not ready for it. I don't think I'm going to want one." But then I said, "You know what? Let's do it." And then there are plenty of people who, have been presented with me as an option or another, mentor as an option, and they say, "No, we really don't think so. We're not ready. We don't want to hear what's next. We want to either find out for ourselves or we would prefer to wallow in what we're feeling right now."
Well, I mean, it is what it is, but at least you're out there and you're helping somebody, right? So you have to take it for what it is. You're doing a good service, and you'll help who wants your help, and who doesn't want your help, hopefully they'll get help somewhere else.
The other thing, and I had mentioned this in the book, is that, when I first got out of the hospital, when I couldn't listen to other people's stories. I just preferred to read them because I'm too much of an empath sometimes, and
Yeah.
soak in all the emotion. And the first time that, during that peer mentor training that I heard about these other patients and how they had their strokes, we all sat around the table and cried for each other and for ourselves. And I just preferred to read it in a book. I preferred, not having to deal with
Yeah.
the emotion that comes with it. So I could
Better.
totally understand how other patients would not want that.
Can you briefly tell us what you found the healthcare system's response to post-trauma patients needing care is, and the issues involving long-term disability for these patients?
Ooh, long-term disability. Well, they're okay, so they're two large and very separate entities. My husband happens to work for one of the largest health insurers in the country.
Okay,
So
wait, don't mention any names.
yeah, I know, I won't. No, no, no. We won't say which. But I had the gift of having that medical director tell me or tell him where I should go for therapy. Made the best recommendation. Not everybody gets that, but very, very rare, I would think. And and so and then the insurance care, once you're in acute therapy, they reevaluate you every week. And
Every
so
week, wow.
they say it was every Tuesday that they would meet, my team would meet and decide how much longer I would need to be in therapy or how much it would be helpful for me to be in therapy. So it was like finding that out. And after the first week, finding out that it was going to be another 4 to 6 weeks and getting so mad about it. And so, because of that evaluation and because of that never ending, you know, possibility of you being there into perpetuity, that was kind of disheartening.
Yeah,
And once you're allowed to leave, it's like, yay, but then it's like, oh, wait, hang on a second. Now I have to go back out into the real world. This is
yeah,
scary. Here, let me go back and visit the people who understood what it was like because nobody else does.
yeah.
And then in terms of long-term disability, gosh, that I think
I mean, I understand many of the claims are denied.
it is, well, because there's so much medical gaslighting. But then also, I think there have been plenty of times where, and like we had mentioned, if you present well, if you present normally and like nothing had ever happened,
Yeah,
then why can't you work 40 hours a week? Why can't you go back to work full time? Why can't you, not have any accommodations? You
yeah,
know, why aren't you just like everybody else? And so, for in my case, it was, why did you work full time? And then why can't you? Why are we still paying you, hundreds of thousands of dollars over years? Why?
right,
Let's, cut you off.
right.
And so, I would get hostility. I would get questions if I missed an appointment. They would send me to their own doctor who also had to do his full evaluation, like from the start of whether I was sick or not. And he's like, "Oh yeah, she's had a stroke." She,
Yeah,
you know.
a lot of bureaucracy.
Yes, yes, yes. So much paperwork, organizations and doctors' offices that say, "Sorry, we don't have a full-time staff that can fill out your paperwork, but we'll give you the reports, and you can turn them in." It's having to deal with that bureaucracy, but then also because they're protecting the corporation,
Yeah.
And the company I work for is amazing and has been since the beginning. But they say they rely on that long-term disability system. And so in doing that, well, they kind of had to go along with their rules. And so they didn't have a ton of control over it.
Yeah.
And so I would get these letters with a ton of, these italic legalese paragraphs saying that according to your employment contract, blah, blah, blah. And I would say, okay, this sounds kind of menacing. What do we do here? You know, doing the best I can. The purpose is for me to get back to full time, not so that I can just skate and get paid for doing nothing.
Right.
But I think that sometimes is a lot of their mentality when they're interviewing their patients or when they say, "Oh, people are just, inherently lazy and, they like getting paid for doing nothing." And, you've got to prove that you are sick or that you can't do it.
Yeah.
And that's a really negative way to exist. No.
Yeah. So, if our listeners and viewers take away just one message from the book Super Survivor, what do you hope that message would be?
Only one?
Yeah, let's go with the one for brevity's
Um,
sake.
gosh, yeah, no. Oh gosh. My largest hope that I would never wish for anyone would be to experience life the way I do now without having to have gone through all of this. And is it possible? Yeah, I think so, because you can try to have a bigger appreciation for the things you have and not think about the things you're lacking, or just have an appreciation of joy and love and all the hokey things, right?
Right.
Kiss your dogs, like kiss your loved ones, hug them, tell them you love them, maximize your time, make the most out of it, of course with limits,
Yeah.
especially physical limits. But, we there's so many gifts that we are given and that we take for granted and things that we just assume. And I'm just hoping that, when people see me and, see this normal looking person and everything that she's been through, that there there is a way to make it through and a way to make it through difficult times, challenges, and to do it with grace.
Well, that's great. A great message. Judy, your story is a powerful reminder that even in life's darkest moments, we can find meaning, hope, and a new beginning. Thank you for sharing your honesty and inspiration with us today. For those who want to contact Judy, you can find her on Instagram at Judy Kim Cage, the author page. Now, I highly encourage our audience to pick up Judy's book, Super Survivor. It's available on Amazon or wherever books are sold. I personally feel, after reading the book, that it is for anyone who has ever faced something that made them question who they are and what comes next. It is for anyone who has to rebuild their life after it's fallen apart. Please remember, if you or someone you love is facing a major challenge, this book shows that recovery isn't just about surviving, it's about thriving. Now, for people who have comments and suggestions for the podcast, you can email me at it's a wrap with rap at gmail.com. Our website is it's a wrap with rap.com. We have a Facebook group. It's a private Facebook group. You can email me if you want to get in, and that's on Facebook. It's called It's a Wrap with Rap. We're on Instagram. It's a Wrap with Rap podcast. We're on X at Rapper, WRAPPER 130. And all the episodes are on YouTube. It's a Wrap with the Rap, the podcast uncut. I want to thank everyone for listening. Please stay safe out there. And for now, it's a wrap. The podcast is so happy and proud to have Blue Sky CBD as one of our sponsors and supporters. At Blue Sky CBD, they know that the highest quality CBD starts from the seed. Blue Sky partners with sustainable, responsible farms for superior hemp plants to extract their CBD and other healthful phytonutrients. Each of Blue Sky's products contain high concentrations of CBD for maximum impact, and Blue Sky offers some of the lowest cost per milligram CBD on the market. All Blue Sky's products are THC free and are tested by a third party laboratory for potency and purity. All this has made Blue Sky one of the only CBD brands trusted by healthcare professionals across the United States. As the demand for CBD and its therapeutic potential have grown rapidly worldwide, it is difficult to know which products you can trust. At Blue Sky CBD, they just don't sell their products, they use their products. Blue Sky CBD proudly shares testimonials of their loved ones who use these products. Blue Sky CBD guarantees the potency and purity of each and every product they sell. Blue Sky tests their products 3 times. First, the plant is tested, next, the isolate, and last, the final product to ensure each product batch meets Blue Sky's high standards. A copy of their certificate of analysis is linked below each product description online. The Blue Sky CBD website contains client testimonials, including a case study for each testimonial from the people just like you regarding people dealing with severe anxiety and insomnia, high blood pressure, pain management, headache, rheumatoid arthritis and spondylitis, and endocrine balance. Blue Sky even makes the product Pet Love for our canine and feline family members. Blue Sky CBD uses CBD derived from hemp that is THC free, which is drug free and can be sold everywhere legally in the United States. Blue Sky CBD wants you to feel confident with your purchase and offers you excellent customer service. If you are not satisfied with their products, you may request a refund of the full purchase price within 30 days of the product received date. When ordering, please use the podcast link to receive 20% off your initial purchase. The link and website information will be listed in the podcast notes.